Russia sent dozens of warships into the Black Sea expecting total dominance. By the end of this campaign, a country without a real navy had turned the world's second largest fleet into a fleet in hiding. Putin's admirals promised control of these waters. Instead, they lost it. Not in one dramatic explosion, but through wave after wave of something far smarter. Stay with me, because what Ukraine just pulled off in the Black Sea is not just a naval story. It's proof that innovation beats iron, that adaptation defeats arrogance, and that the Black Sea may never belong to Moscow again. Let's begin where the shock hit hardest. For years, Russia treated the Black Sea like their private lake. The fleet, based out of Sevastopol, projected power, launched cruise missiles at Ukrainian cities, blockaded ports, and threatened amphibious landings. On paper, it was overwhelming. Dozens of frigates, corvettes, submarines, landing ships, all backed by shore defenses and air cover. Ukraine's traditional navy was almost wiped out in 2014 and 2022. Most analysts said game over, but Ukraine didn't play their game. The strategic context was simple and brutal. Russia needed the Black Sea to sustain the war, to move troops, export oil that funds the invasion, and keep Crimea as an unsinkable aircraft carrier. Control the sea, control the south. But from the very first days, Ukraine started chipping away with everything they had. Anti-ship missiles, special forces raids, and then something new. The doctrine Russia relied on, massive conventional naval superiority, collided head-on with a defensive system built on cheap, smart, expendable machines. And the results have been catastrophic, historically unprecedented for a modern fleet. Russia's Black Sea Fleet doctrine was sound in theory: overwhelming firepower, layered defenses, fortified bases. In practice, it became its own worst enemy. They operated as if the era of big ships ruling the waves had never ended. Large, expensive hulls out in the open, predictable patterns, vulnerable ports. They called it power projection. Ukraine's forces quietly renamed it target practice. The fleet's greatest strength, its visible mass and legacy hardware, turned into its fatal weakness against an enemy that refused to fight symmetrically. Now, here's where Ukraine set the trap. They never tried to match Russia ship for ship. Instead, they built a distributed intelligence web: satellites, drones, partisans, open source tracking, even commercial ship data. They studied every Russian habit, every patrol route, every defensive gap. Then they fed the Russians a false sense of security, let them think Sevastopol was still safe, let them cluster ships in familiar harbors. While Moscow celebrated minor gains on land, Ukraine was preparing a full-spectrum maritime offensive that would turn the sea itself into a kill zone. The weapon wasn't a new super missile or secret submarine. It was something far more difficult to stop: a layered, evolving swarm of uncrewed systems that work together like a living organism. Stay with me before we get to the specific mechanics, because understanding how these layers interacted is what made this offensive so devastating. Layer 1 hit from the sky, waves of long-range strike drones and loitering munitions that overwhelmed radar and forced Russian air defenses to reveal themselves. These created chaos, drew attention upward. Layer 2 came on the surface: Sea Baby and Magura drones, low profile, fast, packed with explosives, operating in packs. They hugged the waves, evaded radar, and struck hulls directly. These weren't one-off attacks. They were relentless, night after night, hunting ships even in port. Layer 3 struck from below: underwater drones that slipped into harbors undetected, hitting submarines and keels where armor was thinnest. One submerged strike on a Kilo-class sub in Novorossiysk showed just how exposed even safe berths had become. No escape. No traditional defense worked when the attackers were cheap, numerous, and didn't need to come home. The interactions were ruthless. Air drones blinded sensors, surface drones delivered the punch, underwater ones finished the job. Russian crews had minutes, sometimes seconds, to react. Repair yards in occupied Crimea became death traps. Even moving the fleet east to Novorossiysk only bought time. Ukrainian drones followed them 360 kilometers away, striking inside the new main base. The replacement math broke. You can't rebuild a fleet this fast when losses keep mounting. Immediate impact was staggering. By early 2026, around 30% of the Black Sea Fleet's combat assets destroyed or seriously damaged. Key landing ships like Yamal and Nikolai Filchenkov hit hard in Sevastopol. Frigates like Admiral Essen and Makarov damaged in Novorossiysk. Submarines forced to huddle submerged at docks. Amphibious capability crippled. Missile carriers pulled back. Russia's once dominant fleet is now largely a fleet in being, hiding, reactive, fighting for survival instead of projecting power. Operationally, this paralyzed Russia's plans. No serious threat of landings near Odessa. Grain corridors reopened and protected, billions in Ukrainian exports flowing again. Russian oil terminals and shadow fleet tankers under constant fire, choking off war revenue. Crimea, supposed to be impregnable, now feels like a besieged outpost. Even Russian telegram channels and bloggers have quietly admitted the scale of the disaster. Strategically, the ripples are enormous. NATO analysts are studying this as a masterclass in asymmetric naval warfare. Demographics inside Russia feel the pressure as economic pain mounts from lost exports. Information control in Moscow is working overtime to downplay it, but the pictures and videos don't lie. Ukraine has proven that a smart, adaptive force can deny a much larger navy control of an entire sea. This is not just tactical success. It's a proof of concept for future conflicts. What comes next will tell us a great deal. Will Russia pour resource into new defenses only to face the next evolution of Ukrainian drones? Can they ever reclaim the initiative, or has the Black Sea become a permanent Ukrainian frontier of innovation? One thing is clear: Putin lost control of these waters not because of Western superweapons, but because Ukraine turned limitation into lethal creativity. Respect to the Ukrainian sailors, drone operators, and engineers who rewrote the rules of naval power with courage and ingenuity. While the land war grinds on out here on the waves, the underdog didn't just survive. They took the sea. And the world is watching what happens when that spirit keeps pushing forward. If you want to understand where this conflict is really headed, the Black Sea holds the answer. Drop your thoughts below. What layer of this offensive surprised you most? Subscribe and stay with us because the next chapter is already in motion.